Hi everyone, this is Jeff Gerber, and this is the first of a three-part training series on how to use the MechWarrior Online game art assets in 3D programs such as Blender. This series is focused on Blender, but a lot of the information can apply to other programs. In addition, a lot of the procedures used in manipulating MWO assets also can work for other Cryengine games, such as Star Citizen. So once you master these basic skills, you'll be able to apply them to other games. Please be aware of all applicable copyright rules and don't steal. Thank you. So the first thing you're going to want to do is copy over all the game files, because you obviously don't want to be working on the live game files, assuming you ever want to play it. So you need to go to your directory where MechWarrior Online is installed. By default, it's on the C drive under program files x86, Piranha Games, MechWarrior Online. This is like the root of the game files, and then under game, you just see all these pack files. These are what you're going to want. You're going to need a tool to extract these into their respective directories, and I use 7-zip. It works really good. So you want to select all these, copy them over to wherever you put your wherever you want to work on them. In my particular case, I like doing it under I have this directory where I have all my mech files, and I make a separate objects directory for each month. That way if I need to go back and get some old data, I can easily do that. So copy them over here, and then you can just select them all, and then right click and go to 7-zip and extract here. I'm not going to do it now. It does take a little while to do it, and I've already done it. And what ends up happening is it creates these directories right here. The next thing that you're going to do is convert all these files, all the CGA files to CGF files. Let's go and take a look and see what I'm talking about here. If you go look at the awesome mech, you can go under the body. You'll see two different types of files. You'll see CGA ones and CGF files. The scale one here is a particularly interesting one. This is an older version of the older mechs will have a scale version, which is basically the entire mech assembled into one object file. The modern method is to basically break it down in all these different CGA files. However, the problem is Noesis doesn't know how to convert CGA files. All it knows how to do is CGF files. They're the same things though, which is kind of convenient for us. All you need to do is rename the extension from CGA to CGF. And it'll work just fine. You will lose some animation stuff, not that big of a deal, but we can get around that. So let's go to PowerShell. I do this in PowerShell just because it's really easy. Then you go to the directory where you have all these files. Let's go to objects. Let's do it here because we're going to convert it's not just the objects file where you keep the mech that you're going to be interested in. There's going to be, in some of these other directories, there's going to be things that you're going to want to convert from CGA to CGF. The PowerShell command to do this is get child item, and I'm going to link this. There's a workflow, and I'll link it in the video so that you can take a look at it. And then you can just copy and paste this. Recurse to do all files underneath. Filter star.cga, pipe that to rename item. Oops. New name. Reference object.name. And replace CGA with .cgf. And no, I don't have that memorized. I have it written down, and I'm just looking at it. So what this is going to do is going to go to all the subdirectories here. It's going to rename all the CGA files to CGF, which is what we want. You will see some errors here as, let's see what it's trying to do. It's trying to create a file that already exists. In some cases, there's both a CGA and a CGF file. No big deal. It'll error out and it won't overwrite it. That didn't take too long. And now what's going to happen is if we go in here, and if we hit F5, or actually it's already updated, you'd notice that all the CGA files are now CGF, which is perfect. The next step we're going to want to do, and this is just housekeeping, you don't actually have to do this, but it does save a lot of time. We're going to remove the low density files so that when we start doing batch processes in Noesis, it will run a lot faster, because there's basically, for every CGA and CGF file, there's going to be several LOD files for them. And we don't want to have to convert them all. So the way we get rid of the LOD files, pretty similar. Pipe that to remove item. And that worked out pretty good. Now let's see if there's any of them left. Nope, that's good news. Alright, so the next step now is to go to Noesis and start converting them. Now Noesis has some limitations. Here, let's go to where I keep my files. We're working on the December ones. Use all the pack files again. We want to go to objects. There's all kinds of objects in here that you can have fun with. So there's a CGF file. The DDS is going to be the image. We're also going to have to convert those. But for the purposes of this video, we're just going to do mechs, both the object files and the image files. So let's find our mechs. Let's go to the mechs directory here. And we're going to just do a batch convert here, because otherwise we've got to individually do every one, and that takes forever. You might as well use the batch tool, because that's what it's for. Now what we're going to want to do is change the extension, CGF. We're going to want to change it to OBJ files, and this is just a personal preference of mine. You can probably use FBX with the later versions of Blender, since it has a decent importer now for it. You're not going to be able to get animations or things like that right now. There probably are ways of doing it. It's just not really necessary at this time, because I'm not a big fan of the default skeletons in them, especially when you're working in Blender, because you still have to tweak them a lot. It's just easier to make your own. The additional parameters is very important. You're going to do flip UV. And the reason you do this is so that when you apply the UV maps to it, they do it correctly. Otherwise they'll be backwards, and if you load them into the mech, you'll notice all kinds of weirdness is happening. Alright, so let's change the name here too. I just like having it go straight out into the same directory that it came from. What'll end up happening is it'll make the OBJ files directly in here. Whoops. Noesis, for some reason you can't alt-tab to it, so you got to click on the thing. We want to take out the in-name. Let's see, we want in-name.out extension right here, because this will make it go in the same directory. Find the folder that we want to work on. Make sure we are December objects mechs. Okay. And we're going to do recursive. Let's try that again. It'll load all the files in here. As you can see, there's a ton of them. Like I said, there are some issues with Noesis where if you have too many files in here, it won't get all of them. So we'll just, I think it'll do all the ones in the mech. I think that'll be alright. So let's give it a rip and see what happens. As you can see, there are a lot of files here. We're probably a couple minutes in. I'll probably just fast forward through this part so you don't have to sit here and watch files get converted. We are done with the batch conversion process here. So you click on OK. You don't want to click OK again, because that's going to end up starting the whole process again. Next thing we're going to want to do is convert the DDS files to PNGs. Yes, PNG. DDS are, I believe, I'm not really sure what they are. It doesn't really matter at this point. PNG is portable network graphic. Makes it nice and easy. We'll do the same folder. We'll click OK, and it should load up all these DDS files. Well, you can see what's going to rename it to PNGs. Here we go, Atlas body DDS. So we click OK. We don't have to do any additional parameters here. There are some issues occasionally with PNG files. They do have an alpha channel, and as a result, when you load them up into Blender, sometimes they're extremely faded. You can barely see any texture at all or any diffuse layer. As a result, in Blender you can just save it as a JPG and go on with your merry way. But as a general result, PNG works good. So we're going to click OK, and away we go again. Alright, now we are done converting the image files. We should have everything necessary to put together a mech. Let's click OK on here. Again, don't click OK here. It will start the whole process over again, and you don't want to do that. You may want to later go back. We just did the mechs directory here. You may want to go back to the purchasables, weapons. In environments, there's all the assets from all the levels, all the buildings and cars and spaceships and crash spaceships, things like that. Characters got some interesting things, the hula girl in there, but I think the hula girl is also under purchasable. Let's see, it'll probably be a standing one. There's the gazelle toy. A lot of hula. Yeah, here we go. Hula girl elf, because it is seasonal. And it is out there. So let's click cancel. We'll do that later. And that's all we're going to need Noesis for right now. So we can go ahead and close it. We are back to our file system. Now we want to do some more cleanup again because we don't necessarily want all these old CGF files and DDS files around because they just take up space. So let us get rid of them. We only did the hang on. Objects. We only did the mechs directory, so we want to make sure we do this in here. We're going to use PowerShell again to delete all the files that we don't want anymore. And so we're going to do get child item recurse filter star.cgf, pipe it to remove items. Oops, tab complete doesn't always work. We're going to do the same thing, but now we're going to do it for DDS. Alright. Now that should do it for getting your mechs to where you want. So now let's fire up Blender and start working on importing these guys in. So let's go to Blender. And one thing we're going to do here is we're going to only work on the scale object because well, I'll show you why. Let's actually just try and import some stuff here. We're going to import a wavefront, and I'm using 2.69 right now. Let's go to mechs, objects, December, objects, mechs. If we go to, let's look at an older one like the Commando, it has the scale object right here, which is what we want. If we import this into Blender, you can see that it basically is the entire mech here. Let's hit Z to turn on surfaces. As you notice, he's lying on his back by default, so what we want to do, and actually let's take a look at this a little bit closer here. If you look up here in the panel, you have two objects. One of them is the scale, and the other one is, well, they're both scale things, but I think one of them is going to be the glass for the cockpit there. All right. But what we want to do, let's get them standing upright. So first we want to rotate around the x-axis 270 degrees, and if we hit 1, let's rotate him around the z 180 degrees so he's facing forward. So now there's your Commando. He looks pretty complete right here. All these different components. Again, if you go through the new model doesn't have all different components. It's kind of annoying to put together. So if you're working with an older mech and you just want to deal with this, it's no problem. Alright, some more cleanup. By default, these object files come in triangles, which are not ideal for Blender. Blender likes working in quads. There's also a lot of duplicate vertices. If you see, there's 54,000 vertices in here, which is a lot. So let's try and convert them. Let's go to edit mode with tab. Hit Control V, then remove doubles, and you see remove 43,000 of those vertices. There's a lot of overlapping geometry there. And the other thing you're going to want to do is convert it from tris to quads with Alt J. And there we go. We've got a much simpler mesh. Let's get out of edit. Let's select the window here. We'll do the same thing. Control V, move doubles, and then Alt J just to make it simpler. And it probably doesn't do too much for this. We're still not talking a lot of geometry. Alright, the next thing we're going to want to do is assign the materials to them. So let us go to the mech here. We'll split this. Let's get rid of this timeline, we don't need it. Here, we're going to convert this to a node editor. Now I like using cycles because it is a much more realistic display. So we want to make sure that we're in the materials node for shaders here. And then we want to click on use nodes, and we'll start off with, we have the output and the diffuse. Now the UV maps all carried over on these guys, so actually let's go take a look at it really quick. UV image editor, go to tab, and you can see all the different pieces here. And if we actually open up image, open, let's go to mechs, December, objects, mechs, what are we on a commando here? We're doing body. Here's all the different PNG files that we converted over. Since we're using the scale one, we don't want to use any of these variant ones. These window ones are going to be for the cockpit window, which we'll do here in a minute. Damage ones, we don't want to worry about that because we're not dealing with it. RGB is for camo patterns. It's kind of, if you want to apply different colors to them without actually modifying the actual diffuse map, that's the way to do it. But what we're looking for is just the regular diffuse one here, commando diffuse. As a general rule, there's three files for every object. You can have the diffuse one, which is color, specular, which is how light really interacts with the object, and then normal, which adds depth to it. Again, RGB for camo patterns, but we're not going to do that. So let's open up the diffuse, and you can see this does look like your typical commando skin. It is offset a little bit here. You can see the alpha channels here too. This may cause a problem. I talked earlier about how you might want to convert it to JPEGs, but because there shouldn't be any gaps here. But let's apply this. You don't actually have to move this onto the image because Blender does tile these things. So even though it's off by 1, it's just repeating this image down here. It's just kind of convenient for so you can see the image and this at the same time. But what we need to do now is actually apply that UV image. So let's go back to the node editor. And the way you do that is you add texture, image texture, run it over to the color, and then let's open up that file. Actually, let's since we already opened up that file, we can just do it right here. And then you're going to want to go to, you generally don't have to do it by default. It's going to apply the UV to it, but just to be for good habit, we probably want to do this. We want to, where is it? Vector. There we go. Texture coordinate. Take the UV into the vector so it'll know it. And then let's get out of object mode here. Let's see if we can get this to work out right. We want the changes from solid to material. And there you go. You have the start of getting the textures on your mech. Now, we had some of those blank spots, but it doesn't look like it really caused much of a problem here, which is nice. Yeah, that's all right. Let's do the window really quick here. We're going to do the same thing here. If you look at them very closely, let's see if we can zoom in. Assign the same material for both of these objects here. And as you can see, we definitely don't want that. So what you need to do is you go to you go to the materials here. Commando scale is the one that we're working with right now. Let's change it to, we need to take him off, create a new one. Let's rename him Commando Glass. Alright, and we're going to want to do the same thing as before, where we take the image file. Let's go to texture, image texture, drag this in, open him up to mechs, December objects, mechs, commando, body, and here's the window. The diffuse one is the one we want. And there we go. That looks a lot better. Alright, so as long as we're here, no, let's actually do it right here. Alright, so let's add the rest of these image textures too. So we're going to need, we have 2 other image textures that we have to do. Let's get them opened up here. Alright, Shift D. There we go. Let's open mechs, commando. Nope, that's not what well, this will work. I just saved these off to a different directory, but I forgot to go into the December one first. Objects, mechs, commando, body. Commando, we're going to do the specular next, right here. And this one we're going to do, if I had saved this already, it'd be a lot easier. You wouldn't have to traverse this every single time. Commando, body, and we're going to do the normal. Commando, DDN, right here. Alright, so the way you do spec is you apply it to a glossy. So let's add a shader, glossy. Again, we don't have to do this, but it's generally a good habit. Have this go in here. We're going to want to add a mix shader in between. And this way we can, let's move this over a little bit. You know what, we're going to actually add a preview panel here to make this a lot easier too. Let's go to 3D view. And we're going to actually have him do the, we're going to make him look, let's move this over a little bit so you can see rendered. Now I don't think we have really good lighting in here, so this isn't going to look too good. Let's add some lighting. Go to world, ambient occlusion. That'll probably help out a lot right there. Now the rest of the world is reflecting off of him. Alright. Alright, so we want to do, let's see if we change specular to, this is pure spec and no image. That's what it looks like. And if you go all the way to the other end, that's pure diffuse, which isn't what we want. You probably want to play around until you get a level that's what you're looking for. I like a little bit brighter, but it's tough to tell because we don't really have the lighting set up in this environment yet. All right, so actually he does look a little bit dark. You see these areas here? They're black here and here, and if you look at in the screen itself, in the texture screen, it looks more normal, normaler. Even the yeah, these are just blacked out. And when we talked earlier about the PNG files sometimes letting the alpha get through, this is exactly what happens. So if you look at this again, you got these alpha channels here that went through, and that's probably the black areas that you're seeing in here that you don't see on here. So let's actually save a copy, and we're going to change this to a JPEG because that won't have an alpha channel. Make sure we're in the right directory, save it, and now when we go to here, let's go back to the node editor. We're going to change this to be X objects. There's our JPEG right there. We'll apply him, and now, as you notice, those dark areas are actually filled with what it's supposed to be. The mech looks a lot better already. So when you use Noesis, you may want to just save them as JPEGs just to avoid this whole thing. It's probably a better habit to get into than what I'm doing here, but anyway, there you go. Now for the normal, let's get the normals on here, and we're going to zoom in here so we can see the effect that this is going to have. Not too much. We want to add a, this actually goes into the displacement, and I think as you see, this is probably a good place to actually see what's going on there. If we cut this, he kind of goes away, but let's actually add in a math node. We're going to change him to multiply, and that way if we want to make the normal a lot stronger, we can hit 1. It's too close. If we want no normal, hit 0. And it doesn't, it's kind of a subtle difference, but it will make a lot, it'll look a lot better when you these are just values that you can tweak. The other thing you might want to do, this is again not necessary, is you want to convert this from RGB to black and white. The normal map, if we go back to the UV image editor, is commando. Let's look at the DDN here. It's already basically black and white, or it's just non-color data. All right, let's go back to the node editor. Now we want to do it same for the glass here. What we're going to do is we're going to take all this, copy it, go to the glass, paste it. Let's just do that. This is probably not the best way of doing it, but sometimes we just want to get results. It'll probably look really interesting here. It's got the proper diffuse, but it's got the wrong specular and normal, and there probably shouldn't be any normal on there. So let's change this to, let's open up, let's see, we're in the window, we're in the spec, we'll do that. And then for image texture, we're going to do, open up window DDN. There we go, perfect. Makes a little bit of difference. Now you get the, it starts to look like what you see in the game as far as the color. And of course, as you add proper lighting to the scene, it's going to look a lot better. So let us actually do, let's add some HDR here. So we were going to do, how is this going to work? Environment shader. And we're going to open up an HDR. See, it's for an environmental texture, it's looking for an HDR image. Since we don't have one loaded up, it defaults to pink to let you know it's an image that hasn't been found. We're going to go digging through my files here to find an HDRI. And let's do field, a nice bright field. Now these can be pretty big, so whoops. But what it does is it just adds a lot more lighting to the scene, more realistic lighting too, so it'll give you a much better idea what's going on. So okay, we've got all the materials assigned. We've got some lighting on here. It's kind of a nice field view, but it's probably not too accurate as far as what we want it to do. So let us see if we set the camera up. Let's rotate on the X. Let's go down a little bit more because they're a mech. They're very tall. We want them to have to be looking up to them. Even a commando is big compared to us. Alright, so if we do a quick test render, this should be enough to actually see what's going on here. And there we have it. We don't have a ground plane, so of course it looks like he's kind of sitting up in trees. Plus the way the images, the camera's set up, it's looking up anyway, so he's kind of sitting in the tree there. Not a big deal, but there you go. That's what the image will look like. We had it a pretty low resolution here, so let's bump it up. Let's do another render. And there you go. You have successfully imported your first object out of MechWarrior Online. You now have textures assigned to him. He's in a form that you can actually start doing things with, and we will have a couple more tutorials here. The next one's going to be about using the new format, which is using all these object files. Let's take a quick look at that again. If we go into Mechs, Commando, the new style has all these different components, and I've got a script that will make it very easy to import it in there and put them all in the right place. We're also going to go over some rigging, which will be another tutorial as well, and once you have the mech rigged, you'll be able to put them in all kinds of fun poses. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next tutorial.